Hello, you're watching Eye on Africa. I'm James Creedon. These are the headlines from across the continent this evening. Police in Cape Town used water cannons while arresting hundreds of refugees and asylum seekers on Wednesday. They had been staging a sit-in outside the UN Refugee Agency's offices, saying they were in danger of anti-immigrant attacks. We'll talk to our correspondent in South Africa about the day's events. Almost 2 weeks of torrential rain have plunged swathes of Central African Republic under water. A France 24 team visits the capital, Bangui, where the river has burst its banks, leaving thousands without food or shelter. And France participates in an effort in Ethiopia to preserve ancient rock-cut churches in the town of Lalibela. We'll bring you a report from one of the first UNESCO World Heritage Sites. Thanks for watching. We'll start in South Africa, where police on Wednesday arrested around 100 foreign nationals occupying an office building in Cape Town as part of a sit-in protest against xenophobia. Hundreds of asylum seekers have been camping at UNHCR offices in Pretoria and Cape Town since the 8th of October. The asylum seekers' demands: they want to be relocated to another country, claiming a surge in racist attacks in South Africa has left them feeling unsafe. Let's take a listen to what some of them had to say today.
People not to do this.
They don't want to even give us access because we are not African, we are foreigner. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? They forget from the period of apartheid.
Because of what? I never see baby of 1 week. They must chase like this. They must get baby like this. Look, people they're out. They're shooting for a gun. No one is animal. If us we are not welcome, they must tell us, they must talk to our government.
And we're joined now from Cape Town by France 24's Aisha Ismail. Aisha, very strong and distressing images, lots of emotions from the streets of Cape Town this evening, and in particular, police firing water cannon at refugees. It's obviously not very good optics for the South African government. What led to this clash today?
Well, good evening. I spoke to a police spokesperson earlier this evening, and she said to me that police members were forced to act and to assist the sheriff of the court to execute a court order. Now, this was a court order to evict the refugees and asylum seekers from that building in the CBD. And as you said earlier, it's a building where the UNHCR has an office, and the migrants which occupied the building weeks ago were demanding that the UNHCR resettle them or find another place for them, another country for them to live in, because they did not feel safe in South Africa. The owner of the building went to court to apply for an eviction order because some of the other business tenants were complaining that their businesses were being affected by the presence of the migrants in the building. And the police were saying that they had absolutely no option but to take this action against the refugees and asylum seekers who obviously resisted arrest. That they were saying that that was the only place where they had to live. They had their children with them, and they were looking to the UNHCR to resettle them because they no longer want to be in South Africa. They no longer feel safe here.
There are reports, Aisha, of a big backlog in requests for asylum. They want to be relocated by the sounds of things, also because of the context of rising xenophobia. Are those demands likely to be met?
Of course, as you say, there is a backlog, but these asylum seekers and refugees have made it very clear that they no longer want to remain in South Africa. They want the UNHCR as well as South Africa's Home Affairs Department to issue them with travel documents and to facilitate for them to leave South Africa and to be resettled in another country. Some people were saying they want to go to countries like Canada and Australia. But of course, South Africa does have a large refugee and asylum population. South Africa's borders are very porous. And just the other day, the Minister of Home Affairs was talking about South Africa setting up a border patrol agency to regulate the influx of refugees and asylum seekers coming into South Africa.
Aisha Ismail in Cape Town, thanks so much for that update. Now, the worst flooding in 2 decades in Central African Republic has left some 30,000 people homeless, according to the Red Cross. The government has called the disaster a huge natural catastrophe. Torrential rains pounded the country for several days, causing the Bangui River and its tributaries to overflow. Our team visited the capital, Bangui, and sent us this report.
In some areas of the capital, canoes have replaced taxis. Every 10 years, the river Ubangi overflows, but this time the situation is worse because of heavy and prolonged rains. Residents had to flee their homes.
It's been like this for 9 days. The water came into my house. I tried to build a barrier, but the water flow was too strong, and as you can see, it all came crumbling down. There are also huge health issues, as the water has flooded more than 200 latrines.
These are the worst floods in the country in the last 20 years.
The river burst its banks progressively, and before we knew it, we were submerged. We fled to our neighbors, but they kicked us out. So we came here with no roof over our heads. We are desperate. We just need help.
The government fears the spread of diseases, especially cholera. There is a lack of drinking water and toilets. It is asking for the help of humanitarian organizations. It needs tents and shelters. Even before the floods, a quarter of the population had fled their homes because of the armed conflict that has ravaged the country since the fall of President Bouzize in 2013.
Meanwhile, in Somalia, early seasonal rains have forced in excess of 180,000 people to flee their homes across the country, particularly in the south, where torrential rains swept through the region. Beledweyne was one of the worst affected areas. The Juba and Shabelle rivers also burst their banks. Humanitarian organisations have been working alongside national and local authorities in affected areas to provide basic needs to those who have been displaced. Now, the town of Lalibela in Ethiopia is known for its rock-cut churches dating from the 12th and 13th centuries. They are pilgrimage sites for Coptic Christians. Now, during Emmanuel Macron's visit to Ethiopia last March, the French president said that France would provide help for the preservation and restoration of Lalibela's 11 churches. The town's distinctive churches were one of the first landmarks named as UNESCO World Heritage Sites in 1978. A team of French and Ethiopian experts has been at the site for the past 6 weeks in order to assess them. Nathalie Tissot has more.
This is Emmanuel, one of Lalibela's 11 churches. Loic is scanning to make a 3D model to help see where weaknesses are that threaten its preservation.
Here you can see the scanner. It has an accuracy of about 5 millimeters.
This deacon is also helping with the scanning. It's essential in these Orthodox churches where some areas are off limits to everyone other than the religious leaders.
He's going through the curtain to this sacred section of the church. The advantage is that I can still see exactly how he's positioning the scanner. We have a 3D model, and we can also put up a 360-degree photo taken with the laser.
In these cracks are the vulnerabilities of monuments that have been evolving since the 13th century. People still come here daily to pray. In 2008, foreign experts came to install roofs above 5 of the churches, funded by the European Union.
We was worried because of, when they put the roof or the protection of the church, they was tell us a promise to remove this shelter in 5 years, but now it is 11 years.
The experts have to decide whether they should be kept. To help, sensors were installed to record the movement of the rocks. They also need to find a way to protect the churches that aren't sheltered by roofs. There are already discussions underway with the local community.
Everything relating to religious identity is very sensitive, and we have to take that into consideration.
Before this one, even there is no community participation. But this one makes difference.
The site study will continue in the coming months, just as archaeological excavations have for a decade. The local community is watching. These efforts are crucial to ensuring the protection of this historic monument that has stood here for more than 8 centuries.
Now, on Saturday, England take on South Africa in the final of the Rugby World Cup. It's a repeat of the 2007 final, which was won by the Springboks. England are the clear favourites, having beaten New Zealand in the semi-finals. But a very different match awaits them. They will have to contend with the power and the ferocity of the Boks. Simon Harding reports.
It is one of rugby's fiercest rivalries. On one side, the two-time world champion South Africa. On the other, England, the only Northern Hemisphere team to win the World Cup. Eddie Jones's side head into the final as favourites after beating New Zealand, but know it will be a different battle against the Springboks.
We've set out wanting to be the best in the world, and we've got to back up what we did last week. It can't just be a fluke, and I think the challenge has been laid out by South Africa. And as you saw them taking Japan apart and Wales, the challenge is going to be up front, and so we're going to have to be there, both mentally and physically.
South Africa's biggest strength will be their forward pack, led by their captain, Siya Kolisi. They will have a day's less rest than the men in white, but South African head coach Rassie Erasmus said he wasn't planning on rotating his team.
Playing so many games in a 6-day turnaround, rotating forwards and stuff like that. So yeah, it is a bit of horses for courses, but we also believe it's our most in-fit form, best available, best combination team. The pressure is on, we feel the pressure, we're excited, but we feel the pressure and we found our ways to handle it and try to work around it.
Superstar wing Cheslin Colby should be back in the matchday squad for South Africa. They've lost their last two confrontations with England, but the last time these two sides met in a World Cup in 2007, it was the Springboks who won the final.
That's all for this edition of Eye on Africa. Thanks for watching.